I should have left the office that night. Nothing would have happened if I had. I stayed. My name is Michael. This was the week when effort stopped being enough. The promotion hadn't happened yet, but the building was already treating me like it had. That's the strange part about hierarchy. It arrives in small adjustments first. A few more people copying you on threads. A few more pauses after you speak, like they're waiting to see if you'll take up space you don't technically own yet. By Wednesday, my calendar looked like someone had poured meetings into it without checking if there was room. I sat through them with my shoulders squared, chin level, voice steady. I kept my hands visible on the table. I laughed at the right moments. I pretended my body wasn't doing its own arithmetic under the surface. Laura had called it increased visibility in a meeting that felt like a compliment and a warning at the same time. She'd said it with that calm, neutral delivery she used when she wanted something to sound merit-based instead of loaded. What it felt like was exposure. The external pressure was constant, but it wasn't loud. It was the soft kind, the kind that makes you correct your posture even when no one is looking. That night, I stayed late. Not because I was behind, because leaving early would have felt like admitting I didn't belong in the rooms I'd been invited into this week. I told myself I was just getting ahead on deliverables, and I was. But I also knew I was waiting for the office to thin out, like the air changed when fewer people were around. At 9, the floor quieted. Lights dimmed automatically in unused zones. The hum of the HVAC became more noticeable, like the building had started breathing louder. I closed one tab, opened another, reread a brief, adjusted a line of copy that didn't need adjusting. Then I looked up. Nina was there, not approaching, not leaving, just present near the glass wall of a meeting room down the corridor, her phone in her hand, but her attention not on it. She wasn't moving the way people move when they're waiting for an elevator or a rideshare. She looked like she'd decided to be there, and the building had accepted it. When she saw me, she didn't signal, no wave, no smile. She held my gaze long enough for it to feel like a question I was expected to answer. Then she turned and walked toward the conference room at the far end of the floor. I watched her go. My hand stayed on my keyboard, but my typing stopped. I had choices right then, micro choices. Look back down, keep working, pretend I hadn't seen anything, stand up and leave, pack my laptop and let the night end. Instead, I stood, slowly, like I was trying not to make the decision look like one. I followed, at a distance that preserved professionalism, and close enough that it still felt like I was being pulled. The conference room was colder than the open floor, as if the glass had its own climate. The city pressed itself against the windows in scattered lights. Rain threatened beyond the skyline, but never quite arrived. Everything outside looked damp and far away, like it had already been decided. Nina stepped inside without hesitation and set her phone on the table face up, centered. That small action did something to the space. It was a marker, a claim, not territorial, just inevitable. I stayed near the door for a beat longer than normal, hand hovering close enough to the handle that leaving would have been easy. My pulse stayed even. My face stayed neutral. My thoughts moved in quick, silent checks. What is this? Why now? What do you say? What do you not say? Long day, she said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't sympathy. It was a statement that expected agreement. It's been productive, I replied. It came out steady, corporate, safe. The kind of answer that couldn't be used against me. She nodded once, like she'd predicted the exact shape of my response. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the chair opposite her. I could have asked why. I could have stood where I was and kept the door between us as a boundary. I could have made a joke that dissolved tension. I could have said I had to finish something, that Laura needed a revision, that a client was waiting. I sat. The chair made a small sound against the floor. In the quiet, it felt louder than it should have. I placed my hands on the table, palms down, then adjusted and folded them loosely. I didn't want them to look tense. Nina leaned back slightly, crossing one leg over the other. No fidgeting, no checking her phone, no glance toward the clock. She didn't perform patience. She possessed it. "I've been watching how you handle pressure," she said. "You don't talk about it much." My back tightened a fraction. Not fear, awareness. "I try to keep things professional," I said, as if professionalism could double as armor. A pause followed. Measured. Not awkward. Designed. "That's not what I asked," she said calmly. The words weren't sharp, but they landed like a correction. The power shift was subtle. She wasn't arguing. She was setting terms. My throat moved in a swallow I didn't plan. I felt the urge to defend myself, to explain that I wasn't hiding anything, that I was just disciplined, that I didn't let personal feelings leak into work. Instead, I adjusted my breathing. In through my nose, out slowly, like I could regulate the room with oxygen. "I handle it," I said finally. Nina's mouth curved into something that wasn't warm and wasn't cruelty. Precision. Recognition. She said, and the sound was quieter than a word, but it felt like she'd filed it away. Nina stood. Not suddenly, intentionally. The chair barely moved. She walked around the table, slow enough that I became aware of every step, the soft click of her shoes, the faint shift of air as she passed behind me. She stopped at my back. I felt her presence before I saw anything. That's the thing about proximity. It makes your body honest. My shoulders wanted to rise. I kept them down. My spine wanted to stiffen. I kept it neutral. She placed a hand on the back of my chair, not on me. The difference mattered. The restraint mattered. "You could leave," she said. "No one would notice." The door was right there, unlocked. The hallway outside, dim, empty. A clean exit. A professional retreat. "I know," I said. The internal conflict was immediate. Part of me wanted to stand and walk out to prove that I could. Another part of me didn't want to break whatever pattern she was laying down. She didn't move her hand. She didn't touch me. She just stayed close enough that my skin registered her as heat. "Then why haven't you?" she asked. It wasn't accusatory. It was observational, like she was reading a report out loud. I opened my mouth and felt the first answer rise, a lie dressed as a reason. "Because you asked me here. Because I'm being polite. Because I'm curious." I closed my mouth again. Silence stretched. She didn't fill it for me. That was the pressure. Not urgency, expectation. Because leaving would be a decision, and staying already was one. "I wanted to finish the conversation," I said. Even as I said it, I realized I was giving her the language she wanted. Conversation. Not meeting. Not work. Not deliverable. Conversation. Nina hummed softly, like she was testing the truth of it against my tone. "Good," she said. "Then listen." She leaned closer, not into me, but into the space beside my ear, close enough that my mind held still, and my body did the reacting for it. The scent of her perfume became specific. Not sweet, not floral, clean and controlled. hands tightened around each other under the table, I loosened them again. That was the first micro decision. Don't show tension. You think control is about holding yourself back, she said. It's not. It's about choosing who you let lead. I stared at the reflection in the window across from me, my own face ghosted against the city lights. I looked composed. It almost felt like a betrayal. I could have laughed. I could have deflected. I could have said, "This is inappropriate." I could have stood up. Instead, I stayed still, and I didn't correct her. Time changed shape in that room. It stopped being a line and started becoming waves. Each moment rose, crested, fell, and the next one arrived slightly higher. Nina spoke quietly, still behind me, still close. She talked about the office in a way that made it feel like a living thing. About how people performed competence when leadership was watching. About how the same sentence could sound like confidence or submission, depending on who said it. I answered when she asked me something. Short answers, measured. But my awareness wasn't on words anymore. It was on space, on distance, on the sensation of being held in a situation that had no obvious label. I shifted in my chair once, trying to regain a little autonomy. The chair creaked. Nina's hand didn't move. That steadiness made my small movement feel exposed. "You're very good at resisting," she said eventually. "It shows." A flicker of irritation rose, not at her, at myself. Resisting sounded like a game, like a confession, like something personal. "I don't see that as a flaw," I said. That was another micro decision. Speak with confidence. Don't apologize. She stepped around into my line of sight, not abruptly, smoothly, like she knew exactly how long it takes for a person to feel the shift. She stopped close enough that the table between us felt meaningless, close enough that my eyes had to choose where to land. Her mouth, her eyes, the space beside her shoulder. I chose her eyes. "Neither do I," she said. "I see it as a threshold." The word threshold hung between us. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't sexual. It was architectural. A line you step over and can't claim you didn't. I swallowed again, slower this time, and made myself breathe out. I felt the impulse to look away, to break the intensity and relieve the pressure. I didn't. Nina's gaze didn't search for permission in the way most people do. She searched for alignment, for proof that I understood what was happening, even if I refused to name it. The door was still open. Another chance, another exit. I heard the faint buzz of a phone somewhere on the floor outside, distant, like the rest of the office still existed. I could stand up now and say, I should go. Instead, I remained seated, and in doing that, I felt something shift. My restraint stopped being a shield and started becoming a kind of offering. Nina lifted her hand. For a second, I thought she would touch me, and I felt my body brace, not in fear, but in preparation, a readiness I didn't want to acknowledge. Her fingers stopped just short of my jaw, close enough that my skin registered the heat of her hand without contact, a hover, a pause, a test. "This is where most people stop," she said quietly. Her voice wasn't teasing. It wasn't pleading. It was a calm observation, like she was pointing out a sign on a wall. My mouth went dry. I could end this with one sentence. I could pull back. I could stand. I could put distance between us and let the line remain theoretical. But I also knew something else. If I moved, I would be the one making it physical first. And I refused to give myself that excuse. I refused to be the initiator. I refused to take the lead, so I stayed perfectly still. I didn't lean in. I didn't pull away. I didn't speak. The silence thickened. My heartbeat stayed slow, but it felt louder. I could hear my breathing in my own ears. I forced it to remain even, a controlled rhythm, as if I could keep my composure by managing oxygen. Nina lowered her hand. Not disappointed. Not relieved. Just adjusted. Good, she said again. You didn't rush. Then she stepped back and turned off the lights. The room dropped into darkness, the city glow bleeding in through the glass like diluted ink. My reflection vanished. Her outline remained, close enough to be real, far enough to be unclear. We stood there, unseen, breathing the same air, and the boundary became something you could feel instead of something you could talk about. I had another chance to leave. I could have used the darkness as cover. I could have stepped back, found the door, ended it cleanly. Instead, I stayed. The decision settled into my body before I let it reach my mind. And the rest of the night folded inward. When the lights came back on, it felt like the room had been reset, but I hadn't. Nina was already composed, as if the darkness had been just another tool she'd used and then put away. She glanced at her phone like a normal person might. Like this could be framed as nothing. We should go, she said. I nodded. The motion was controlled, but I felt how much effort it took to keep it small. I stood and immediately adjusted my jacket, smoothing it in a way that had nothing to do with wrinkles. It was a reflex, a way to restore a surface version of myself, to make my body look like it hadn't been making decisions on its own. We walked out together. The office was empty now, lights dimmed in sections. The long hallway looked like a corridor in a place that had been closed for the night. Every sound we made felt amplified. The soft click of shoes, the faint rustle of fabric, the quiet hum of the building. The external pressure returned in a different form, the risk of being seen, not by someone specific, by anyone. The idea of visibility. At the elevator bank, Nina stopped. She turned her head slightly and looked at me, the way someone looks when they're setting a rule that will be obeyed. This stays here, she said. Not a request, not a mutual agreement, a boundary drawn by her and offered to me as the only acceptable option. I felt the urge to ask what this meant, to name it, to clarify it into something manageable. But naming it would give it form, and I had the sense she didn't want it formed yet. Yes, I said, one syllable, clean, compliance without softness. Nina nodded once, satisfied. No smile, no reassurance. The elevator doors opened. We stepped in, standing close enough that I could feel the air shift between us, but not touching. Another prolonged proximity, another restraint. The ride down was quiet. When the elevator reached the lobby, she stepped out first. She didn't look back. And then the doors closed between us, and I was alone in the descending glass box, watching my own reflection reappear in the mirrored panel. I looked the same. That was the problem. The next morning, the office was bright and ordinary again. People laughing near the coffee machine, someone complaining about a client call, the mundane noise of a workplace that believed itself to be stable. I arrived on time, my tie straight, my expression neutral. My body felt different, not aroused, not shaken, just recalibrated, like it had learned a new pattern and hadn't decided if it liked it. In a meeting, Laura reviewed the latest deliverables. Her voice was even, the kind of professionalism that makes praise feel like a policy. She pointed to a slide, nodded once, and looked at me. Strong leadership, she said. I want you more involved going forward. The words landed in the room like a stamp. I accepted it the way you're supposed to. Calmly, a small nod, a measured, absolutely. Inside, a different tension rose, the dissonance of being rewarded publicly while something private sat under my skin, unnamed. Across the room, Nina didn't look at me, not because she was avoiding me, because she didn't need to. That was the power shift I felt most clearly. She wasn't chasing my attention. She'd already reorganized it. I moved through the day with new discipline. I listened more carefully. I spoke with fewer words. I watched timing in a way I hadn't before. Who spoke first? Who interrupted? Who waited? Who let silence win? And I realized I was doing it because she'd shown me something in that conference room. Control isn't held by gripping harder. It's held by choosing when to release. The external pressure stayed. Laura's eyes, visibility, opportunity, the system. The internal conflict stayed. My need to keep things clean versus the fact that they no longer were. And Nina stayed too. Not in my messages, not in my conversations, but in the structure of my attention. That night, alone again, I replayed the week in fragments, not the dialogue, not the details, the moments where I could have left, the door in the conference room, the hallway outside, the elevator arriving, the darkness. It wasn't that Nina had forced anything. That's what made it worse and more true. She hadn't pushed. She'd positioned. She'd given me space to choose again and again, and then watched what I did with it. I understood, finally, that what had begun wasn't a romance, not yet. It wasn't an affair, not yet. It wasn't even a secret in the usual way. It was a realignment of power, psychological before physical, a private structure forming beneath the visible one. I had crossed nothing that could be reported, but I had stepped into something that wouldn't release me easily, because it wasn't built on impulsive action. It was built on conscious permission. And the scariest part was how calm I'd been when I gave it. I knew something would change after tonight. I just didn't know how. I don't know yet what this will turn into. I only know it didn't end here. Next week, something will have to change, either in me or between us.